All right, recording started. So, Dillon, thanks for doing this with me. So talk to us a little bit about where you are in your writing journey.
I have been writing since I was really young. I have not finished anything other than fan fiction.
Well,
So
what kind
really,
of fan fiction?
um, K-pop.
Okay, nice. That's awesome. What? Some of the best books, some of the best selling books out there started as fan fiction.
Yeah,
That's
that's very
fantastic.
true.
Yeah.
So yeah, and right now I'm working on a dark urban fantasy novel.
Okay.
Um, so that's what I'm doing now. I'm trying to really focus on this piece of work.
Awesome. So that's what we're going to read today is the Dark Urban Fantasy novel.
Yes,
How far are you in it?
like 11K words.
Nice. That's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Um, okay, let's talk to me a little bit about, okay, before we start,
Mm,
because this is something I was wondering as I was reading. First off, I loved the piece. I laughed and was like super intrigued the whole way through.
thank
If
you.
this were the first chapter of a book, I would absolutely have gone to the next one. So
Thank you.
it's a great opening. Um, talk to me. I do want to talk to you a little bit about artfully removing the burden from the reader, because you've
Mm,
got some places where you make me rewind my brain.
okay.
So where I'll read it, I'll get one image in my mind, and then you reveal a new piece of information, and I have to rewind, and interpret what I read before,
Gotcha.
which can be used as a really great technique if it's intentional,
Mm,
but it's not intentional.
that's
So we we want to remove it. So that's what
yeah.
I want to focus our time on. But before we get there, talk to me a little bit about the rules of the world. Who's a ghost? Who's not a ghost? How do we know?
So the premise of this story is that there is a supernatural underworld
Okay.
that has beings called ghouls, which are essentially like evil spirits,
Okay.
and there's reapers for like each region, continent type thing.
Nice.
So um what's kind of happening is that Elijah was born with these abilities, um, and he has never been trained properly how to use them.
Okay.
His mom passed away when he was really little. His dad was never in the picture. His dad is where the abilities come from, so he never knew anything about that.
Gotcha.
Um, and then when he turned 19, he started doing like home call exorcisms and like medium readings for people.
Okay.
So
Are we
he
gonna get to see some of those in the book?
possibly.
Okay. We got to see them in the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of things that are going to be going on.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we need the so I want to get back to the rules in a minute, but
yeah.
just to pause here for a second to say, because you're only at 11K, so we can play with your plot a little bit.
Yeah.
You are picking up the story in not in the discovery of powers,
Mm,
but in like living with the powers, which I love, right? Like I would much rather pick up the story there
yeah.
than in the Harry Potter, you're a wizard, Harry, right? Like I'd rather pick it up in the I have a ghost dog, right? Like so that's just more fun.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. I think mostly because we read so many origin stories. And if you make it into a series, you can always go back and make like a novella of the origin story, your like prequel to the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it's great to leave that open. Um, why was I bringing that up? Oh, so we got to see some world before. This is a
Okay.
great opening, but I need to see him doing a medium reading. I need to see him doing an exorcism, because as we see him change into whatever he's going to become,
Hmm.
we need that um
Beginning stage.
and the fumbling and the ways that he's potentially doing things wrong that,
Okay.
that he'll
Yeah.
change at the end. So we got to see those moments. So
Okay.
just and I was wondering because you mentioned that he's doing exorcisms, and I was like, oh, I gotta see that. All right, yeah. So anyway, keep going. So he's doing at-home exorcisms, and he's he doesn't know what these powers are. He just kind of has learned to live with them.
Right. So where this piece ended, he's about to go into a coffee shop with Desmond,
Okay.
who is going to tell him that there are like a set of rules that Reapers follow.
Okay.
And Elijah, whose actions are the same as a Reaper, has not been following those rules because he doesn't know them.
Perfect. Okay.
So, and then also, this item that he got from Amethyst is a really big piece of the whole story because he's not supposed to have it. So
Okay.
now, like, the supernatural underworld government are like looking for him because he has this item.
Gotcha. So accidentally on the run.
Yes.
Because nice. I like it. How does he grow and change in the book?
So he's very unsure of his abilities at first. Like,
Okay.
he is not happy to be doing what he's doing, but he likes helping other people.
Yeah.
So he's glad to like help rid people of their burdens or like connect them with their past loved ones.
Okay.
I totally lost my train of thought.
Talking about where he's going in the book.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So when it gets further down the line, Desmond has this group of siblings. So it's him and then 4 other siblings who are going to kind of take Elijah in and help train him because they're all Reapers and he's untrained.
Okay.
So I want him to like gain a bit of confidence in himself, and I want the others to have confidence in him that he doesn't really feel.
Okay.
I want him to like have that support going forward, but there's also like a lot of things in there where like they're hiding things from him and he's not going to trust them. But at the end, I would very much like him to just be more sure of himself and more confident in what he's doing, because right now he doesn't feel like he's helping people.
Yeah. So it's kind of a coming of age story.
Yeah, kind of.
And we're going from like the if we're talking just like basic archetypes, we're going from like the well-meaning scamp who's like helping people but also kind of scamming people at the same time, to the like novice of a community type move. Okay, I like it. Just a heads up, because dark urban fantasy tends to series, right? Like you'll have to do this as a series. Don't make him too expertise by the end of the book, because you want somewhere to grow for season 2 and 3. Does that make sense?
So I do have a series in mind.
Perfect.
But the rest of the books aren't focused around Elijah.
Okay.
So all the books will be dual POV between like they're all main characters, but like between the main characters and one of the siblings. So there will be 5 books because there's 5 of the siblings.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm going with it. Everyone will have like a potential partner, but
nice.
A very long overarching story.
Okay. At some point, you'll have to start bringing them together.
Yes.
Because your reader's going to fall in love with Elijah. And then in book 2, there's going to be a new character. And at first, they're going to be like, where in the F is Elijah? And so you're going to have to really sell that second character.
Yes. Yeah.
That Elijah will need to be around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited. It sounds like a fantastic series. I'm excited for it. Sure. It sounds really great. Okay. Let's open up the thing and look through it.
Yeah.
Before I jump into just ranting about my comments, is there anything you specifically wanted to cover or look at?
No, I was looking over the comments last night and they all seem great. I don't have any like additional questions or anything.
Okay, awesome. So I'm just gonna go through them in order, because I think with that like idea of reader burden. First, let's talk about what's working really well. Your character voices are fantastic, especially for an early writer. Your character voices are just excellent. They sound different. We meet 3 characters in here. We meet Star. Their voice is very kind of cynical and playful.
Mm-hmm.
Very well done. We meet Elijah. who has that kind of like well-natured but hiding in his voice. And then we meet Amethyst, her, right? Am I
Yes.
getting it? Okay, thank you. Sorry, I just forgotten for a minute. Her voice is very kind of sharp and a little brutal, which is good.
Yeah.
Any of these love interests for Elijah?
Desmond at the end.
Desmond at the end. Okay. I forgot about Desmond. We meet Desmond.
Yeah.
So that's right, of course. Yeah, you actually laid that out really clearly. So so let's work through it a piece. So your voices are great. The piece is dialogue driven, right? Like there's three main conversations. There's the conversation with Star, the conversation with Amethyst, and the conversation with Desmond at the end. And you're doing a really fantastic job of not interrupting segments with prose. So what I mean by that is that we have each line a character says, I'm going to call an utterance. So like perfect stop by Amethyst, Elijah groans. That's two utterances. A group of utterances is a segment.
Okay.
That segment, as these people, this is something you're doing really, really well, which is why I want to stop here because I don't want you to lose it.
Okay.
Because as we start passing out our work to beta readers, they're especially beta readers who are writers, I promise they're going to tell you you have too much dialogue. You do not listen to them.
Okay.
So, you can listen to them if you want to. But don't take up the dialogue. It's great. So what we like to do as writers is we take this segment here of dialogue and we like to drop prose into the middle of it. And we do that in order to like describe the scenery around him. The problem is that interrupts the energy of the piece because something, Sorkin and the name of the wonderful writer who wrote things like Gilmore Girls, whose name is completely slipping my mind. Something they taught us is that tight utterances that follow quickly after one another build emotional tone. So if you have a series of sad utterances afterwards, what you're doing is you're like filling up this bucket with sadness. The more utterances, the more drips into the bucket. Or think about it like building a wall of bricks. Each utterance puts a new brick on the wall, so that if you just have 3 utterances of sad exchanges, you just have a small wall. If you have 13 utterances of sad exchanges, you have a big wall. It is possible to make your wall too big, and the reader's like, why are we just building this giant wall? But that being said, sorry, a really bad joke came to mind about building walls that we're just going to let fly out the side of my head. So we're not going to go. So anyway, that's what we, so you're doing a great job of keeping your utterances together to build that energy, which is what's making your piece so entertaining and engaging, is that we're really getting into the personalities of the character exchanges.
Yeah.
So I don't want you to lose that. I want you to keep that as you keep writing. And then you're also doing a great job of giving us world building, but holding that world building in between segments, which is where it needs to go, right? Like this is just a beautifully paced piece. You've got world building. We get right into a conversation. You've got about 2.5, 3 paragraphs of world building. We get right into a conversation. You don't interrupt the conversation. You keep us in the moment. And then you pull us out and do some more world building for like 4 paragraphs. And then we're back into the conversation. And it moves really quickly. It's really nice. And then we come back to a little world building and then into the next conversation. So you can just kind of see how well paced it is, which is part of what's making your writing so engaging, is the like getting us into a conversation and letting us live in that forest. So if you think about the conversation pieces like the forest that you walk around in, you can touch the trees, you can like the leaves crunch under your feet, you can smell the air. In the forest, you're enthralled in the forest. And then these sections of prose that are world building, they're like jumping in a helicopter and looking down on the forest from a 50,000 foot view.
Yeah.
we need both, right? But when we don't want to keep getting jerked in and out.
Right.
And that's something new writers make a mistake about, is they like give us 2 seconds of the Force and they rip us out of the Force. And they give us like 2 seconds of the Force, they rip us out of the Force. You're doing a great job of keeping us in the Force just long enough to really enjoy it. So excellent work there.
Thank you.
What it does is it creates this really nice emotional tone for what you're doing, because you're stacking those bricks and building that wall so they can really start to feel each conversation and how they're supposed to look. So it's, yeah, really nicely done. All right, let's get into where you're messing up. I'm just kidding. Let's get into how we can like show some things. I've said too many nice things, Dylan. I have to start saying. So in these world building sections, you need to give me a little bit more.
Okay.
Which I feel weird. I never tell people I need more prose, but I need more prose.
Here we are.
Yeah, here we are. So for example, in these first 2 paragraphs, you've got 2 pieces that I want you to expand. The man passing him on the sidewalk startles as first. So, I forgot to say, I also love the present tense. It makes it very active and real. It's very good for urban fantasy. If you haven't read, a friend of mine, a fellow dialoguer who is writing, does some work in present tense, S.W. Miller, just wrote some books. Man, yeah, your writing reminds me of his, and I love his as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, Shane is probably, I know he listens, so he's probably happy now that I just called him out. Anyway, so yeah, back to where I was. The man passing on the sidewalk startles as Beyonce's voice screams from Elijah's phone. He stops his skateboard with a firm foot on the cement and nods to the Asian man in apology. The man sneers at him, looking over, apparently not appreciating his piercings or the hoodie he's wearing with the skeleton hand holding up his middle finger. When the man continues walking and Phantom trips him, Elijah can't help the chuckle that escapes his lips. So I have no idea who or what Phantom is yet.
Right.
And so I have no way to visualize this scene.
Okay.
I come down and I say, a snap of Elijah's fingers, his large black dog bounding over him while the man tries to find out what exactly he tripped over. Okay, so now I can rewind just one sentence and figure out what it is I'm seeing, right? I did have to rewind a sentence. I'd rather not do that, but one sentence isn't too bad. The problem is, down here, you tell me that Phantom is a ghost dog.
Yes.
Like a whole 4 paragraphs later.
Yeah.
So now I have to come back up here and reimagine this scene in my mind.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so we don't want to make the reader rewind like that, especially when it's not strategically done.
Right.
So if you had started this scene where Elijah was talking to Phantom and someone else didn't know, like later, he's talking to Phantom and Amethyst doesn't see Phantom,
right?
Then you could reveal Phantom's actually a ghost dog. And that's a nice strategic reveal because it creates a tone of mystery in the piece that makes us go like, wait, why can't she see it? What's happening? So strategically using the mystery to create an emotional tone. But that's not what you're doing here. Here you just didn't tell me he's a ghost dog. So, and I can tell because there's no mystery being built.
Yeah.
Right? It's just oh, and so when I read this line, I thought the dog was moving really fast.
Okay, yeah.
Right? Because, and here's the thing, the reader is visualizing your story in their imagination, right? If we want to get into the nuts and bolts of what's happening when the reader reads, they're reading and they are imagining, their brain is doing the work to visualize this scene and conceptualize what they're reading, right? Which is part of the reason that we love reading, because it activates our brain in that way that most things don't anymore. Right. So what we want to do as the writer is give them just enough scenery to help them see what we want them to see. So if you think of the imagination that they're painting as this stage, right? And there's things that, if you think of it as the reader sitting in the theater of their mind, and they're watching this unfold on a stage. There's a couple things on the stage. There's the scenery of the stage, right? There's, and like things in the world, in this prose, the world building, that is the scenery. The fact that he's a ghost dog is a scenery, right? There's the character voices. They're going to hear the voices. There's the emotional tone, right? They're going to feel the emotional tone. And then there's the conflict, whatever the plot is that's driving this thing forward. So you have great conflict through this whole piece, and then Elijah needs this piece, and he has to go talk to Amethyst to get it, and he doesn't want to talk to Amethyst. So immediate conflict. And then you've got great conflict in that Amethyst doesn't want to give him the piece.
Right.
And then it's a lot of money, right? Like, so good conflict all the way through. But where you're lacking is in that scenery.
Okay.
You're not giving me enough to visualize the piece, and you're causing me to rewind all the time. So, you know, the man passing him on the sidewalk, as Elijah screams at Ellery Man, he sneers at him, looking over, apparently not appreciating his piercings or the hoodie he's wearing, with his skeleton hand holding up its middle finger. So here I have some really great scenery. I know I've got an elderly Asian man passing this punked out character.
Yeah.
I'm old. I don't know if punked out is the appropriate term anymore. I'm a 45-year-old dad. So, and then down here, but then we lose it here with Phantom. And this is where we need to start giving more. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. I dwelled on it so much because I'm going to come back to it a couple times, because there's multiple times that you do that. Here's another place where we want to take away the reader burden. So originally you wrote, what do you want? Elijah answers when he finally digs his phone out of his back pocket. So I hear the voice, and then I see the action. Here, though, that he's talking on the phone is important.
Yeah.
So give me the action first, and then let me hear the voice.
Okay.
Right. And it's just about empowering the reader's imagination to not make them have to guess at what's happening, to keep the pace of this prose up. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then here, so later you're going to tell me that Star has changed his ringtone. That might happen if you stop changing my ringtone. But up here, I don't know that Beyonce isn't his normal ringtone.
True. Yes.
Right. Like, because I don't know anything about him. This kid just walked on the stage of my mind, and I'm like, oh, okay. He wears hoodie sweatshirts, that he loves Beyonce. Like, that's what I'm assuming. So if you're going to do this gag where the ringtone is different, you got to tell me up here that he didn't like the ringtone. And here's where it starts to get complicated, because you've got a very dynamic scene here. He's passing an old man. The old man is judging him. The old man is tripping over his ghost dog, and his cell phone is ringing something that he doesn't know, a tone that he doesn't like or know. So how you lay those 5 pieces of scenery out to not distract the reader with everything that's happening on the stage is tough. And you have to be strategic about it, right? Like, what's the most important thing you need him to know? Well, there is a ghost dog. That's pretty important, that he's a ghost dog. There is an old, that he trips up this old man is a great way to give us an introduction to who he is, because he doesn't stop to help the old man. He doesn't seem to care, right? Like, so it's a fantastic introduction to who he is. This is one of those places where later, if this is part of, and I want you to start looking for these because they're great tools to use in your story. If you want him to become more compassionate, if you want Elijah to become a more compassionate character, later we need to see an old man trip over the dog, and we need Elijah to stop to help him.
Yeah.
Right. Those repeated scenes that you can bring back through your plot that start to communicate to the reader character transformation. So just think about those, right? Like, because you're building them here already, right? Like the conversation with Amethyst is another place where, like, hey, this could be a repeated scene. We need another conversation with Amethyst later in the book in which their interaction starts to change a little bit, that demonstrates Elijah's maturity. Does that make sense? So all that to say, you got 5 pieces of information in your first 2 paragraphs.
Yes.
You don't want to make this into 6 paragraphs because you
Right.
could, right?
Yeah.
So we want to be strategic with how we add information. I might have the cell phone ring, like startle the man and confuse Elijah,
Okay.
right? But you got to set up this gag that he
Mhm.
changes his over. You got to tell me up here that it confused Elijah,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then, you know, and don't give me a full description of how the dog looks, but when the man continued walking, you know, and Phantom, Elijah's ghost dog, trips him, right? Like, or
Mhm.
Phantom, the invisible dog that only Elijah could see,
Right.
trips him,
Yeah.
right? Like, if you don't want to reveal that he's a ghost yet, of course, the name Phantom kind of gives it away. Here's another thing. Later, you change the dog's name to Tommy.
Yes.
Why
was
are we changing
reading-
the dog's name to Tommy?
I was reading the notes. So like Tommy is like a nickname for Phantom because Tom is at the end. So like Tommy was just a nickname. But thinking
I
about
got
Elijah's
it.
personality, who does not like nicknames, he
Yeah,
wouldn't use it.
he wouldn't give his dog a nickname.
No.
Well, and I also have a question about like when you call a dog by a nickname, that's just the dog's name,
Just the dog's name.
right? Like, yeah, the dog, yeah, especially from the dog's perspective. The dog
Right,
doesn't know it's a nickname. The dog's like, oh, I have 2 names. I'm Phantom and Tommy. You know, Elijah doesn't like nicknames. Phantom is a mouthful.
Yeah.
So, you know, you could be like, when the man continues walking and Tommy, the Phantom dog, trips Elijah, like that would be a way to get the name in here.
Okay.
But again, reader burden, later you say Tommy.
Yeah.
And I had to be like, wait, who in the hell is Tommy? Right? Like, yeah, you're just making me pause. And what happens with this reader burden is every time I have to stop to rewind or figure something out, it like you're earning like tired points.
Okay.
And if you get too many tired points, I close the book.
Yeah.
Right? Because remember, most readers, I mean, that I know, I haven't done an academic study on this. Most readers I know read at the end of their day. They've worked all day. They're tired. This is how they're relaxing. They want to read a book before they go to bed. They already have a bucket full of tired points.
Yeah.
That they've like chalked up. So if you keep giving them tired points by putting this burden on them, they're going to close the book.
Yes.
Right. I'm reading a book right now that has big chunks of prose and character names that are difficult to pronounce. Now, the book is great. I love it. But I literally only read like 5 pages at a time before I'm like, I can't. And I close it and I put it away because I'm tired. And it's a lot easier to go to sleep watching Always Sunny on Hulu than it is to struggle through these names, right? Like, so I get like 5 names. They're constantly introducing new characters. And I'm like, I can't do this. So it's that kind of like, I'm too tired for this tonight. You don't want to do that to your reader. So like each one of these like reader burdens is a tired point. It doesn't mean don't create a burden on the reader. Just do it strategically so that you're spending those points in appropriate places. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. We talked about that. Again, this is another place for like, help me imagine how Star says this interprets what they say.
Yeah.
Right. So you can sound a little happier to hear from your best friend. Can be read as snarky, can be read as laughing, can be read as you know, irritated.
Yeah.
Right. You want us to read it in a pout, signature pout.
Yes.
Right. So give me that first. And if you give it to me first, I'll hear everything else in that voice.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're like you're setting up in the stage of my mind. The first time we hear this character's voice, you're establishing like, hey, this is what they sound like before you hear their voice. You don't have to do this every time, but the first time we hear a character, if they have a signature style to their voice, give it to us up front. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Also, the lilt in their voice registers as their signature pout. That's a beautiful line. Oh, so here I'm now into my utterance, like into my segment of dialogue. I have no idea what happened to this poor old man. I don't know if he's following. I don't know if he's like in the background, like way yelling at his hand. So you got to close that out for me up here.
Okay.
Right. And I would do it. I don't want it here in the segment.
Right.
Because I don't want you to interrupt that energy you're building. So get it up here as Elijah's digging his phone out of his pocket.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? Elijah digs the ringing phone out of his pocket as he looks at the old man who curses him and walks away. He accepts the call and asks, right? Like something in here that lets us know, like, okay, the old man's off the stage. Like that guy moved off the stage. Yeah. Because again, in the theater of the reader's mind, that guy's still on stage.
Right.
So all of this is happening.
And he's just listening.
And he's just standing there waiting to talk to Elijah. I almost expected when I got in the middle here, Elijah to like look at the old man and be like, 1 second. Right? Like, so get that dude off the stage.
Okay.
Yeah. We talked about the ringtone. Okay, so here, I just want a little bit, the tone here is great, right? And I'm just gonna read this segment to build to this piece so we can talk about these two. Okay, we talked about the ghost dog. So we can talk about this piece right here and why I want body language. Okay. Oh, come on, Eli, it's not that bad. She hates me. Yeah, we all do, but you don't see us complaining. You complain all the time. Whatever, you ask me to make this thing, and she is the final piece I need. You don't see Amethyst, you don't get your little tracking device. You'd already planned on sending me when I left to walk Tommy. Here, there's several ways I can read that line. Mm-hmm. He can be irritated. He can be playful. He can be having a revelation. Mm-hmm. You already, right? Right? Like there's just different ways I can read it. So give me a little bit of body language, a sigh, a groan, a snicker, a laugh, because it helps me interpret who it is that I'm talking to, that I'm watching on stage, right? Like it helps me get an image of who he is in his mind. So just adding like a little dialogue tag here that gives me a little bit of insight into how this line is to be read will help me visualize it. Yeah, and we talked about Tommy and the ghost dog. Okay, we talked about the pacing. That's great. Yeah, he drops his board onto its wheels so it can take off again with Phantom jogging to keep up with him. So this is where, like, now you've written this great conversation. You've had this fun opening, great conversation. I'm fully in. You've earned some tokens with me as the reader now.
Thank you.
So spend them, right? Like spend a couple and give me a description of what it's like for a ghost dog to run next to your skateboard.
Okay.
Because the ghost dog can clearly interact with the human world. Mm-hmm. Right? He trips an old man.
Right.
So I'm learning the rules of your world that ghosts can interact with things, or at least the dog can. If other ghosts can't and only the dog can, then that's something you'll have to establish later and explain, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But here, like, just give me a little bit about what it's like to have this ghost dog running next to you. Like, is he splashing in puddles? Is he like stopping to sniff things? Is he like interfering with the world around him? How engaged is this dog in the physical world? And like what's happening as it goes by? Can he run through a car? I don't know. Like, does he have to pay attention to like the physical structures around him? But you know what I'm saying? Like, because you enter into this world of ghosts, right? Because there's established rules around ghosts that you have full freedom to break, manipulate, change, do whatever you want with. My 7-year-old is about to interrupt us. I'm just warning you. So there's a. Hi, good morning. Can I call the Yes. There's sorry.
Okay.
There's established rules around ghosts that we need to that we need to know where your world centers. What rules are we keeping? What rules are we breaking? This is a great place to give us some of those rules around ghosts.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Or at least around hellhounds.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you break them later, you can break them later, but you just have to explain.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was all great. The description of the Amethyst shop is fantastic. I loved all of that. The one thing I would add that you do really well with Desmond later is, this is something I learned from Chris Kane. I need to give her credit. Tell us how this description makes him feel.
Okay.
Because that tells us something about him. Okay. Right? So let us know. Amethyst is squinting at him from beneath her straight bangs when he turns toward her. Her hair is long, nearly touching her waist, with bright green highlights matching her t-shirt. A pair of purple headphones hangs around her necklace that match the color of her lips. How does he feel about that kind of coordination? Does he feel like she tries so hard? Does he feel like I could never pull an outfit together like that? Like, is it respect? Yeah. Is it disdain? Like, people who do this kind of work in the morning. But you see, if you can tell us how he feels about this wonderful description of this character, you give us insight into him and their relationship.
Yeah.
Right. And Elijah's our vehicle. We're living through Elijah. So we want to know how we're supposed to feel about this. Right. Like, because that's the real question we're asking is, how do we feel about Amethyst's wardrobe? Right. How does he feel about Amethyst's wardrobe? Just out of curiosity.
And now I'm thinking about it. I think that he would like it, like he respects her style, but he would not want her to know that he respects her style.
Nice. Okay, see, that right there reinterprets the conversation for me. Because the conversation is very much one of adversity, right? Like they're pushing back against each other. But if you let me know up front that he respects her, then the adversity is translated into like adverse admiration. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But that's how like telling me how he feels about her can shape and deepen the relationship coming after.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So give me that note and let me know, like, hey, as you're walking into this is what you can expect. He respects her, but he wishes that she would just make things easier. Maybe there's some like, admiration, like he wishing he could pull that kind of stuff off, but he barely gets out of bed in the morning, right? Like he's worn this sweatshirt for 3 days in a row. Because then and that's a place where, like, if that's somewhere you want to go with him, at the end of the book, I expect to be seeing him working to have more professional outfits like Amethyst. Yeah. Right? Like, it all depends on your character growth, and how he feels about these other characters are really a reflection on how he feels about himself. And then we can use that to like show the reader him becoming a stronger character.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, he doesn't like nicknames. She calls him 2 different nicknames in here. Up here, Star also called him Eli. He didn't respond to Eli. This is a good place because you're going to stop. Elijah sighs at the use of his last name and closes the door before walking further into the shop. You got to explain that more. Okay. Because it's a character development thing. And you haven't fully started the segment yet, right? Like you're kind of like, even though she said something, we're still not into the conversation. So we're still in world building, right? Like you're not interrupting any energy here. So go ahead and give me that like next piece of character explanation that helps me understand why he doesn't like when people call him weird names, right? Yeah. Like, yeah, because it's an interesting character trait, right? Like, and it's an interesting part of his voice that he wants to be called Elijah. Right. What is that?
So he had a older brother who used to like play around with his name and like call him a bunch of different nicknames,
Yeah.
which is essentially what also Amethyst does, is that she just makes up
names.
words out of his name and he hates it.
Okay.
But she also hates when he calls her nicknames. So,
Okay.
but his older brother used to call him nicknames. His older brother got kidnapped and they never found him. So now it like correlates to that for him.
Okay.
So he just feels bad about it.
Okay. Is he aware of the correlation?
That is a great question. I don't think so.
Okay. So, and the reason I ask that is because that's pretty self-aware, right? So it's interesting that he doesn't like it, but he never says anything about it.
Yeah.
That's also something about his personality that's interesting. So I just need to know. I'm asking all those questions to say, like, I don't need that backstory here.
Okay.
If you give me that backstory here, we're going to be doing that thing where we take a beautiful like intro to a conversation, and all of a sudden it's 7 paragraphs of backstory. It's like way too much.
Right.
We don't need all of that. We just need a note about how it makes him feel when people misuse his name. Like Elijah sighs at the use of his last name. Period. Right. He wishes, like, he doesn't know why, but he wishes people would just call him Elijah. Yeah. It's a nice name. Or like he wishes people would just call him Elijah. Why does everybody always have to blah blah blah, right? Like just one sentence in here that gives me a little more insight into why he doesn't want people, like how he feels, in addition to the explaining that sigh, how he feels about his last name. And then he closes the door and walks further into the shop, right? Like, so I just need one more sentence that gives me a little more insight into his character.
Okay.
Yeah.
To kind of expand on that, when Star calls him Eli, he doesn't mind as much because they've known Elijah since he was like super young. So he's just kind of gotten used to that. But with Amethyst, who like he doesn't know as well, he doesn't like it. Gotcha. But should I kind of make that distinction of him feeling?
I wouldn't. It's too in the weeds.
Okay.
That's your judgment as a writer.
Okay.
Right? Like it's your judgment as the writer. We want to stay as present as we can. The reason I want you to explain it here is because in the present, he's responding to her calling him a nickname. So I want a little bit more about why he's doing it. Yeah. The backstory, where I would describe that backstory is if later Amethyst and Star are both talking to him.
Okay.
And Star says, Eli, go get blah, blah, blah. And Amethyst is like, why do they get to call you a nickname?
Right.
But then you can have Elijah say like, well, I like them better. Or like, they've known me longer. Or like,
right.
Yeah, Star is Star. You're not Star, right? Like that's where that kind of like backstory, you can start to fill it in, but you got to find a way to get it in the dialogue.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And again, that's kind of fun and playful. It's not a necessary thing. It's not like, oh, I have to have that explanation, because that doesn't necessarily reveal to me anything. I mean, it does a little bit about Elijah. I don't know. It's your call as the writer. We want to stop and pursue these things with a sentence or two when they're telling us something about his personality and his character that helps the reader become more endeared to the vehicle. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, that's just me telling you your dialogue is awesome. That's all that note is. Okay, I want you just to slow this down because I'm having a good time. And by slow it down, I mean give me more utterances, put more bricks on that emotional wall, right? Like give me more utterances and what's going on. So Star wouldn't let you back in without what you need and you know it. Elijah simply scuffs his toe of his Converse on the floor. God, you're annoying. Yes, I have it. What the fuck do you need it for anyway? And then you jump back into her. It took me way too many favors to get my hands on this, right? Like, so you're giving her, in this utterance, you're giving her kind of 3 to 4 beats. God, you're annoying. Yes, I have it. What the fuck do you need it for anyway? It took me way too many favors to get my hands on this, right? We've got 4 beats there.
Yep.
Because I'm enjoying the conversation, slow it down.
Okay.
Right? Like, God, you're annoying. Yes, I have it. Let him respond. What the fuck do you need it for anyway? Let him respond. It took me way too many favors to get my hands on this, right? Like, so just slowing it down so that we can live with the characters a little bit longer.
Okay.
If it were a boring conversation, though, I told you to do that. Yeah, and then here, yeah, so this is just you crushing the world building. I'm just going to read it because you nail it here. You give me Elijah's full backstory in 3 sentences, which is great. Elijah sighs and pulls out his wallet. Doing exorcism house calls are no easy task, and it usually annoys him to be paid in cash. But now he's grateful for the wads of cash he has tucked in his cross-body fanny pack. He sees the girl's purple eyes widen as he pulls some hundreds, 50s and 20s, and starts counting them. So this is, you told me so much about him in 2 sentences, which is really great, right? Like, I know that I learned he's doing exorcism house calls. I know that it annoys him to be paid in cash. He'd rather be paid some other way.
Yeah.
I'm learning that he just carries a ton of cash around with him at all times, which tells me something fascinating about him. Yeah. And then I also learned about Amethyst, that she is impressed by the cash and likes the cash, right? Yeah. So these are all things, unfortunately, that I now want explored as a reader. And this is why I was saying you got to have some chapters where we talk about an exorcism.
Yep. In
those chapters, we have to see him being annoyed by being paid in cash and why.
Okay.
I mean, my gut is that I would make it about haggling. That like, if people are like, okay, I don't have the full $50, but I got 40, I got 2 20s in cash, right? Like that kind of haggling with cash. Right. I would go, but wherever you go with it. Yeah. And then knowing that he has this kind of money on him all the time is one of those, like, there's a gun, you've hung a gun on the wall in your play, and now somebody has to be shot. So the fact that he's got this wad of cash, that has to be something that happens with that at some point. Yes. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Had you already planned for that?
No, but now I'm thinking about it.
And you don't have to, right? Like, there is no have to. I say something has to happen. There is no have to. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Anytime that you give us something unusual about a character like that, right? That he's like a drug dealer walking around with lots of cash, right? Like, then the reader's like, oh, that's a thing that's unique about him. That's interesting, that can be used as a tool later in the conversation. Yeah. Any questions about that?
No,
okay.
All makes sense.
Yeah. So as when I'm writing, I will like end up putting these kind of paragraphs in just by accident, especially when I'm doing urban fantasy, because there's so much world building involved. So I don't know how you're tracking all of this, but I use Post-it notes. I have to keep Post-it notes around that I'm like, deal with wads of cash. I like it. I just have to like put it somewhere, and it'll remind me as I'm writing a chapter, like, oh yeah, Elijah has wads of cash.
Yeah. And
like, that's an important thing. Some people keep it in like a book, like a character book, where you have like this big document that I get lost in those documents. I'm like, I can't. I'll keep it in spreadsheets, but for me, spreadsheets are more about tracking character voice than detail, world building details like this. You just got to have a system.
Yeah.
In which you're dropping these kind of details that you're gonna have to follow back up on later, right? Like I would be leaving myself a note as I write this, like, make sure to write exorcism scene. Elijah is annoyed by being paid in cash, right? Because we want to see that, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I really wanted them to haggle here.
Okay.
Because you set up that she's like, oh, he's got cash. I want him to be like, I have 2,500 in cash, take it or leave it. And then I want her to be like, you know, you can put the rest on a card. Right? Like, so
Right.
I want just a little bit of back and forth between
Yes,
them.
absolutely.
Yeah, because again, because you've written great entertaining characters, I want to see more of them together. Right. It's a good problem. Yeah, this is me complaining about you changing the name of the dog on me in the middle of the piece. This okay, so here this just needs to be tightened up. This isn't a like reader burden thing, it just needs to be tightened. The dog huffs and tilts his nose up. He glances out the glass door. Now, later I'm going to find out that's actually Elijah glancing out the glass door, but because the dog is also male, I think that he is the dog. So the way I originally read this as the reader was the dog huffs and tilts his nose. The dog glances out the glass door. It's dark outside. The sun had set beneath the horizon fully. There are some lampposts, but a lot of the ones in the area are burnt out. And at this point, I was like, wait, am I in the dog's head? The one directly across from the store flickers, and he's able to spot a person leaning their shoulder against it with their arms folded and a mop of dark, shaggy hair hanging into their face. And at this point, I'm thinking like, well, does Elijah see this person too, or just the dog?
Right.
And then you're like, Elijah's only able to notice they're dressed in all black and combat boots before the light flickers. And then I'm like, oh crap, this he was about Elijah.
Right. Yeah.
So you make me as the reader rewind and reinterpret this whole thing,
right,
because of a misplaced pronoun. So that's just an example of how like reader burden makes me go, okay, I'm tired. I like right. I don't want to put it
that
down.
makes total sense.
Yeah, so we want to remove all of those that we can.
Yeah.
So I would note that this is the second nickname she's used.
Yeah.
Right. Now that I understand what you're building here with the nicknames, that he wishes somebody would just use his name, just note that like she's using the second one, the second nickname. Great, on her. Yeah. Because initially, and readers do this all the time, they assume that we, especially if you indie publish, they assume that we as writers have made a mistake. So they'll be like, oh, she changed like the Amethyst changed the last name.
Right.
Like, oh, that's a mistake. The writer doesn't know the last name of their character. But for me, that's like, if you just note it that this is a second nickname, you take care of that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. The closeout here with Amethyst is great. I had no notes on any of this. The transition into the next conversation is really good. I loved this, and I wanted a little bit more of it, because this last line really took me by surprise. So we meet Desmond here, right? Does it matter? As the man stands, Elijah can't help but notice how broad he is, despite being a couple inches shorter than his own 6 feet. Now, to this point, I don't know Elijah's sexual preferences.
Sure.
So noticing his broad shoulders and his height could mean to me, and how I originally read it, was that Elijah is intimidating.
Okay.
Because we meet this man on the street who has a knife to his dog's face.
Yeah.
So you start describing the man. This is one of those places where the emotions Elijah is feeling are actually contrary to what's supposed to be happening. Right? Elijah's supposed to be angry and defensive about his dog, and instead he's feeling an attraction to this man. So we need to note that contrasted feelings to remove the burden from the reader to figure it out on their own. Because I read this line and I was like, oh, this dude's scary. His face was littered with piercings, a hoop on both sides of his lip, a hoop in one nostril, and a stud in the other. More hoops hung from his earlobes and more studs lining his ears. I don't know yet that that's what Elijah finds attractive. Right? Like, I'm in a vehicle and I am 45-year-old dad reading this, and I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's a miscreant. Right? Like, so we need to, I don't actually feel that way, but take the burden away from your reader.
Right. Yeah.
Like, man, Elijah loves how these piercings are arranged on this guy's face.
Yeah.
His curls hang into his eyes, but Elijah can still see him appraising him as well. He shakes himself out of his daze. And I'm like, oh, we were in a daze? This hot stranger has just tried to kill his dog. And now you're pointing out to me like, oh no, this whole thing has been about him thinking this guy's hot.
Yeah.
So give me a sentence up front
Okay.
that's like, does that matter? Elijah couldn't help be drawn to the stranger's intensely attractive features. That's a terrible line, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
Add something up here up front that's like, hey, I think this guy's hot. Then describe the guy. And then you can come back at the end and be like, he's not hot, he's trying to kill my dog. Right? Like, so, and then, shaking himself out of a daze makes sense, but set it up for me to like create that contrast. So as I read it, I get that there's an emotional contrast here of, I think this guy's hot. I being in the vehicle with Elijah, I think this guy's hot, but I shouldn't think he's hot because he's trying to kill my dog.
Right.
Another world building thing. Even at the end of the piece, and this is one of those places where like I wasn't sure if you're doing this intentionally or not. Even at the end of the piece, I'm unsure if Desmond is a person or a ghost.
Oh, okay.
Because I know Elijah's seeing ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
No one else has spoken to Desmond.
Mm-hmm.
You have a line in here. I'm not sure if Phantom Outside. You have a line about like Elijah sometimes seeing people, like Elijah sometimes seeing ghosts who want his help.
Yeah.
So that made me think like, oh, this is a ghost. Because Elijah like ignores him, and then Desmond attacks the dog. So there's like multiple questions I have coming out of this. Okay. Is Desmond real or is he not real? Can Elijah tell the difference between a ghost and a real person? Right? Again, this can be like that mystery can be strategic.
Yeah.
If you don't want the reader to know if Desmond's real or fake, then like, have you read Under the Whispering Door by T.J. Klune?
No.
Okay, this is great. You'd love it. Great. Okay. It's very much in the vein of what you're writing.
Oh, cool.
It also has reapers who like help ghosts pass over to the other side. Very different than what you're writing, but very much in the same similar vein. When we first meet a reaper, we see her at a funeral. At the ghost's funeral that she is there to reap, and we can't tell if other people can see her or not.
Gotcha.
Because she's in the back and she's laughing. We can't tell if she can see him, and then she addresses him, and we're like, oh wait, is she a ghost? Is she not a ghost? But T.J. Klune works out the whole chapter in this like unveiling of world building with this deep intentionality of not telling you anything about her until she explains herself. So you have that starting to build here with Desmond. Is he a ghost? Is he not a ghost? He can interact with the dog, he can see the dog. So is he like Elijah or is he not like Elijah? If that's a strategic build where you're like, part of what needs to be revealed is who can see Desmond and who can't see Desmond, then I would have Elijah questioning that in here toward the end. Right? Who is this guy? Because the way it ends is normally Elijah wouldn't entertain anything like this, but he's also never met anyone who would see Phantom. He thought there had been others who would see spirits like he can, but never anyone who confronted him. If you want to keep that, is Desmond real or not real? I would add in here that he doesn't even know if Desmond is a ghost or a person. Because again, I have the question of like, can Elijah tell the difference? And so can he tell, like, what's the world build for you? Is this like, how does Elijah recognize whether someone's a ghost or not?
I think he just assumed because of the way he was flashing in and out of spaces.
Yeah. That's why I assumed too.
Yeah.
He's there and he's not there.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I'm trying to think about how he knows, like outside of Desmond, like what ghosts look like. Because there's like, in this world, there's like two separate kinds. There's like the general ghost who's just like a passed on person.
Yeah.
And then there's these things called ghouls, which he doesn't even know the term for because he's never
Yeah.
been introduced to the Reaper world,
Okay.
which are very monster-esque people who are like covered in black char.
Okay. Has he seen them before?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
That's what he does the exorcisms for.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Can the ghosts interact with the world around them like Phantom can?
The ghouls, yes. The spirits, no.
Okay. Do you want to have him question whether Desmond is a spirit or a person? Is that even a mystery you want to play with?
Yes.
Okay. So we need him actively questioning it in this scene.
Okay.
At some point, we
Yeah.
need him wondering whether this super hot guy is dead or not. And then the other thing you're going to have to figure out is, how does Elijah know when someone, like, how does he figure it out?
Right.
Does he get that person around other people and see whether people can see that person? Does he? If that's the case and you want to hold out this mystery, then you actually need Elijah trying to get people to address Desmond.
Right. It's
And
actually going to happen like immediately in the next scene.
perfect. Does somebody immediately recognize Desmond, or does, because if you want to keep the mystery playing, you need Tommy's efforts to get people to recognize Desmond to totally fail. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yes.
But not fail. And it's got to be creative, not fail in a way that's like, can you see that dude? And then be like Tommy, but like, you know, or sorry, Elijah, but you needed to be like an artful way of like, Elijah walks into a store, walks back into Amethyst's shop to see if Amethyst can see Desmond, but Desmond doesn't follow him in.
Yeah.
And then he's like, damn it. And he's like, trying to like pull Desmond in, and Amethyst is like, would you stop being crazy? Right? Like that kind of like, you know, and then like, can you see that guy outside? And they look out the window and there's actually like 4 guys outside, right? Like that kind of like comedic, like Tommy can't get it right. That would be a way to like play with this idea of, is Desmond real or not? Yeah. But I don't know if you even want to do that. That's just that's just a suggestion of like what's possible with this kind of like mystery of like, is he real or is he fake? I get this now. You have Phantom, aka Tommy, yes, original. Now that you've explained it to me, I get it. I don't know if that's too much reader burden, or if that's just you got an old man reading your book. I don't know. Oh, so here's another one. He glances at the outstretched hand and then back at the man who's now smiling. Nice. What's nice? The outstretched hand is nice. The name is nice.
The name is nice.
The offer is nice. Then we need that nice up here connected to the name.
Okay.
And we need him being like, to his surprise, he does and holds out his hand. I'm Desmond Rushman, right? Nice. Tom, why do I keep calling Elijah Tommy? Nice. Elijah loves that name, right? Like, or like, nice. Elijah wish he had a name like that, right? Like something that tells me that nice connects to Desmond Rushman.
Yeah.
He glances at the outstretched hand in the back of the man who's now smiling, right? Like, so put that nice up front so that I connect it to the name. Yeah, Elijah rolls his eyes. This is a great line, right? What do you know for? Elijah rolls his eyes, being a great lay. Can I go now? Man, that's a great line. It's such a great line. I wanted to bring it. I wanted to spend more time with it.
Okay.
But I couldn't figure out how. And you see me here like screwing with your dialogue to figure out how, and I couldn't figure out how to do it. Yeah, so it was really good. All right, anything else you want to talk about before we?
This has been super awesome and super helpful and super informative, so thank you so much.
Yeah, you got it. All right, I'm gonna hit stop and we can talk a little bit more.
Sure.